Hi, Cheri, Casey, and Christina. Thank you for joining us today to talk about your campaigns for labor commissioner. Cheri, I'm wondering if you might be able to start us off by telling us a little bit about why you're running and why people should vote for you over the other candidates.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. I know this is your last interview, so I really appreciate all of you going the duration on this and inviting us for this important conversation. My name is Cheri Helt, and I am running because I have a lot of experience that really fits itself well into running for the Bureau of Labor and Industry Commissioner. I'm a wife of 30 years. I'm a mom of 3 children. 2 are grown and 1 is in 6th grade. And then I also have a business that I've owned with my husband for the last 18 years. And at the peak before the pandemic, we employed 104 people. We are now working our way back after the pandemic, and we now have 64 employees. So it's been a great experience to work alongside of my coworkers for the last 18 years and have the knowledge of what it means to have a small business for a long duration of time. And then my other hat that I think is so important is my school board hat. I sat on my school board for 9 years. I also sat on the Oregon School Board Association board, as well as the state school board as Secretary Clarno's designee. And with the school board knowledge, I have been overseen union contracts and bargaining, and I've been part of those conversations for almost a decade. And then I have my other hat, which is my state legislative hat, which I worked on policies to benefit all Oregonians and really had a great experience in the legislature passing bills that would make Oregonians have a better quality of life, such as the Paid Family Leave Act. And so I am running because I want to make sure that I bring this experience that I have and the knowledge and the lens that I have to the position of BOLI Commissioner, a state agency, which is struggling and is in desperate need of turning around in a transparent way and really addressing the backlog of unassigned cases and making sure that all Oregonians have a agency that they can count on and can address our issues for our employees.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Casey, can you go next?
I'd be happy to. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. There's a little bit of a wind, but it seems to come and go, so.
Yeah, sorry about that. Farm living. Well, so I just want to begin by first thanking you all. I will, Helen and Mike, you've both been really responsive when I've sent things to you, so I appreciate that. But I happened to see Senator Boquist at a Shark Tank event for high school students in Dayton this morning, and I said, "Hey, I'm talking with the editorial board at the Oregonian today," and I said. I'm not a negative person, but I feel like this needs to be said that state agencies are failing at their basic missions, BOLI included. And Senator Boquist, who he and I have a lot of disagreements, said that's the statement that the most people in Oregon can agree upon of anything. And you've seen polling along this, but I want to dive in specifically. At BOLI, we hear about wage theft that's not having a penalty paid. We hear about enforcement that's non-existent. I mean, the 3 of us hear about this. No one knows about BOLI, and those who do know don't trust it. I hear about shoddy investigations. I hear about high caseloads that mean long wait times, like Cheri mentioned. Sorry, I want to call you Rep Helt all the time. A settlement agreement at the state capitol that appears to be breached. The highest profile case in which the penalty has to be considered, and a hostile workplace complaint that went up to but stopped short of being found to be substantiated. And to me, that's an unacceptable position for any of our state agencies to be in. And I was with Rep. Alonzo Leon and Senator Boquist, and we had a robust discussion about what does it take to change this. And when I want to note that when agencies fail again and again, it's not just like, it's that people are getting hurt. and they're losing trust in our democracy. Those two things are so very important. And I also want to note that there's a lot of very good people at these state agencies who need their support from their elected officials, and they need to know that they can take those risks in the pursuit of public service. But I'm running for Commissioner of Labor and Industries, back to me, sorry, because people's lives really are on the line, and people's dignity is on the line, and people's democracy is on the line. It's that big of a deal. And I come to this race with the education. I have a master's in a master's in forest ecology and a bachelor's in biochemistry, necessary to learn fast, to remain skeptical, and to take on that new work. And I come to this race with that work experience of being a farmer and knowing what employers need, and being a farm worker and knowing what vulnerable workers need. And most especially, I come to this race with the experience of leading a state or an agency as an elected official, as Yamhill County Commissioner. And that means I know how to support staff, and I know how to set expectations, and I know how to follow up and ensure accountability. And I also know how to change culture when that's the thing that's needed. And I just want to be really clear, BOLI needs to not fail. And I know that's awkward, and I know that if I was writing for you, you wouldn't like that, but it needs to be independent and needs to communicate well with people, and it really needs a rebuild from staff to IT to the budget. And I'm so excited to be with you, and I want to pass it off. Well, I'm going to pass it off to Helen rather than to Christina.
Great, thank you very much. But you got it right, Christina, if you can tell us a little bit about why you're running.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate everybody's time. My name's Christina Stephenson. I'm a mom. I'm a civil rights attorney, small business owner, born and raised in Oregon. And I'm running for labor commissioner because I actually fundamentally believe that Oregon should be the best place to live and work in this country. And I know that may sound like a lot, but I mean, it's only going to happen if we elect people who actually believe that and want that to be the vision. So, you know, my day job is I represent workers who are getting a raw deal when their employers are not following the rules that are enshrined by the Bureau of Labor and Industries. So represented hundreds of workers throughout their state in their cases of unfair labor practices, wage theft, discrimination. And, you know, that looks like a lot of things, you know, hundreds of employees cheated out of their wages. That looks like sexual orientation and race discrimination. It looks like a whistleblower case, you know, where my tiny law firm went toe to toe with Wells Fargo, you know, took on this enormous company and their army of lawyers, and we won. And I'm proud of that. But I also own and operate a business, you know, a business I started at the kitchen table when my son was 3 months old. And I know what it means to pay payroll, the taxes, the salary, the benefits, and, you know, whether it's March of 2020, you know, the height of COVID or a banner year, you know, I know what it means to pay my employees well before I pay myself. And so my perspective, you know, as both a attorney that does this work, who spent tens of thousands of hours with the law that is enforced by this agency, and also a business owner, I have a really unique perspective to what's going to make both business owners and employees thrive in this state. And, you know, the way I see it is that Oregon makes a promise, you know, if you work hard and you play by the rules, you're gonna have someone in your corner who's looking out for you. And that is the promise I want to uphold as the next labor commissioner.
Great, thank you so much. I'm just going to rotate a little bit, starting each question off with someone different. So Casey, if you can go first on this. All of you in your responses to the questionnaire we sent out referenced BOLI's backlog of complaints and the office's inability to investigate them in a timely or adequate fashion. How would you change that dynamic?
Yeah, so this is where my experience as a county commissioner comes in, really, is that I know when we need to increase the budget and when it's not a budgetary issue. I know enough to listen to staff, right? Staff at BOLI are dedicated workers who serve the public. So listening to staff, redeveloping that office morale, listening to them about what they need, and then finally setting up more efficient ways to do the work of the office. We don't need new statutory authority. We don't need to do new rulemaking. We really need to focus on an agency that needs a strong leader. And I mean that in the sense of somebody who's willing to go to bat for the staff in pursuit of that public service mission. And for one very, very specific example, as county commissioner, I oversee our public works agency, which does roads and bridges. And for the longest time, they said, this is what we do. And they focused on roads and bridges to the detriment of the right-of-way itself, which is the whole area that we take care of. And when we started realizing that we needed to do things like protect an endangered butterfly or protect native species in general, and really do maintenance of spaces rather than what makes the average driver happy, there was a new like invigoration of office culture among staff, both office staff and line employees who were out there doing the work every day. And that reinvigoration, the mission, was so helpful to actually being responsive to people in the community. So now butterflies are coming off of the endangered species list, and people know that when they call Public Works, they're going to get a response right away.
And I appreciate that, but I guess I'm wondering, like, is there, I mean, do you have any specific ideas in terms of how you sort through that backlog? I mean, is it a matter of, when you say go to bat, getting additional staff, or what is it that would really just kind of on day one you would do to help address this?
Yeah. So it's not just staff, but and the three of us know just as well as that we're near historic lows in terms of staffing levels at the Bureau of Labor and Industries. But we also see really inefficient processes at the Bureau of Labor, both on the IT side of just handling documents back and forth, and the sheer slowness of responding to complaints. I had the experience of working with the OLCC, so I know that there's a state agency that can handle documents quickly and sort through them well. And then we really need to do more prioritization. And I will say, I'm not stealing your thunder, Christina. Make sure you talk about what you need to talk about. But right now, because of the Michael Fester case, or because of the injustice that happened to him, now all cases that come into civil rights are given equal priority. And that means that the backlog grows over time. So taking a look at what, and I'm trying really hard to not talk into your territory, Christina, so just stop me if I am, but really taking a look at areas that need more attention first in terms of a full investigation. And I've talked with other state agencies and other state agency heads about what their investigations look like at BOLI, and it really is, it is shoddy, frankly. So when we start in January, one of us will start in January. There will be a new biennial budget, and my plan is to have a budget ready for that really reinvigorates staff, and that also takes on that IT role, because responsiveness, I mean, frankly, with the employment department, the debacle there was primarily driven by having a really out-of-date IT infrastructure that simply couldn't work for the moment, in addition to a lack of creativity. So I will leave you with that, because I want to make sure the other folks get some time.
Great, thank you. And Christina, if you wouldn't mind going next on that question, I guess what would you do to relieve the backlog or address that backlog?
Well, you heard a little bit about the budget, but BOLI has less than half the workers it had 40 years ago, right? And of course, our budget in Oregon is a reflection of what we value, and so far, that's been reflected in not valuing this agency. And in terms of, I see it as two sides of the coin. So in order to decrease the backlog, we also need to be investing in things that are even further downstream, which is providing our good employers the technical assistance they need to comply with the law in the first place. Our technical assistance division only has 6 employees in it for the entire state. And then when we think about the actual caseload that our investigators have, I mean, they're completely unsustainable, but the solution, it's really easy to say, put more money in it, right? I mean, that's such an easy thing to say, but what we have an opportunity to do is this model. It's called strategic enforcement, and this is out of Rutgers University, and it contemplates the exact situation we're in, which is that we have limited resources. So how do we do the best with what we have? And so there is an intake a process that is going to have us be focusing our resources on the worst offenders, the repeat offenders, and triaging, really, because we cannot be treating every complaint when we have this volume as if it is the only complaint we have, and that it's divorced from an entire economic context. So this model is designed to make us be able to do more with less.
So can you kind of explain how that would play out? So for instance, you've got a lot of complaints that have not yet been assigned. How would you go through sorting or what would the strategic enforcement framework call for in terms of how you prioritize that?
So it's a 4-step kind of triage process where, at the lowest level, you might unfortunately have no agency action. And I'll let the legislature decide if that's how they want us to be doing it, but that's what they've given us, right? And so the next level is, maybe you're writing a letter to an employer to have them understand the compliance issue. The next level is a more focused sort of investigation where you're more focused on mediation and conciliation, solving the problem in that realm. And then Bully uses all of its resources, the powers of the agency, to go at employers that have a history of not doing right by workers, that is borne out by the data and is supported by places where we think we can have an industry-wide influence. So that if we really put our resources in one place, that we're not just affecting the individual respondent in a complaint, we're actually sending a message to the industry. We take this seriously, and hopefully that will make a difference.
So, but does that mean that at the very first level, there's a certain amount of discretion in terms of what complaints are even kind of responded to?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have an idea at this point, just what would go into that sifting? How you would sift through those?
I'm going to rely on the data that comes back through this process to see where we should be prioritizing the resources. I mean, that's the whole point of the model is we're using it, using the data.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And Cheri, how about you? What would be your approach to addressing the backlog at Bully?
Thank you for that question, Helen. So first thing that I would do is audit the department to figure out where its strengths and weaknesses are, to have a full overview of what's happening and where the backlog cases are, and where the staffing issues are to address those backlog cases. And then at the same time, congruently meet with every staff member, because the staff members that are there are going to be my new coworkers, right? I'm going to work alongside of them to make sure that they get what they need and that they feel supported so that they can do their work. So I need to understand what tools that they need and what's making the backlog happen. Do they need more coworkers, or do they need an upgraded computer system, or both? And how can we work through that? And then from there, together, I would like to develop strategic plans and metrics that I make public and transparent. Because I think the most important thing that needs to happen out of this agency is that we need transparency for our public so that we know. And on the school board, one of the things that we did was we built a dashboard. And so I would like to see a dashboard built for this agency to be able to track where cases are at and how long they're taking, so that it is absolutely transparent and public, and that as an agency, we can show that the state of Oregon doesn't just have failed agencies, that we can have really awesome agencies that can really focus on their work, do it in a timely manner, serve the public good well, and do so with fidelity and enjoy our jobs doing so. And so I think supporting the team, the coworkers, coming up with a strategic plan, metrics, making them transparent and accessible to all the public, is exactly how I would go in and address that.
Okay.
Helen, oh, did you have a
Sure.
follow-up? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. Nope.
No, I was just thinking, I'm a slow person, but that's why the farming's great, because I have time to think. So I just realized that we saw a larger scale, and I alluded to with the employment department, a larger scale version of this in a moment of crisis that both Christina and Cheri experienced very, very clearly. And you all saw it. Mike wrote about it. We know this, which is this failure of this agency to deal with an unprecedented surge. And at the county, what that looked like is that we were, as county commissioners, getting emails on a daily basis. Like I would say a dozen emails a day with very specific, hey, I can't get this thing, or this application is blank. And that was a crisis moment. And we all jumped into it. And what I learned from that was that unfortunately, some people get preferential treatment because of an in. Like when the county commissioner wrote to the employment department, that person had success. And I hope that we all can agree here, the three of us, that we all want a system where everybody has a fair chance. But what that looks like is, it probably looks like clearing the backlog by demanding funding at the agency from the very beginning. And I realized that it's not the process, that's not how we do things, but the emergency board has taught a lot of things. And it taught us, one of them is that we can staff up an agency and we can extend call times and open up offices very quickly to clear these backlogs. So I just wanted to make sure that all options can be on the table.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Let's see. Christina, let me ask you this, because one of the things that I'm wondering about is just where this surge in complaints is coming from, or is there, part of the agency that has, has greater labor needs than the other? And I guess just kind of with that, is there anything that you think BOLI should not be doing? Like, for instance, does it make sense for BOLI to be investigating housing discrimination complaints? Are there any things within its current mission that you think might be better suited in a different office or agency?
I think it's a great question, because there's always questions about whether our government could be doing things more efficiently. And maybe there are actually roles that are in other agencies that touch on BOLI, which are better suited for BOLI, like building codes division, or, I know a lot of people have talked about the employment department, which of course is not in BOLI. And the paid family medical leave insurance is just going to be mostly implemented by the Oregon Employment Department, and BOLI is only going to have a small role in that process. And so, yes, I mean, in terms of, does it make sense for some pieces to be in other places? Housing is a good question. Because right now about 6% of the complaints are in the housing and public spaces area. And to me, when we have these, when housing is as tight as it is in this state, to have that level of complaints tells me that people have no idea that this agency even exists, because this is not only race discrimination, sex discrimination. I mean, this is family discrimination. I mean, you could see someone, hey, you've got kids, I don't want to rent to you, you're going to mess up my place. So what I would say is it is there, and so we have to invest in it, because there's nobody else who's doing it. I mean, and this was a fight actually back, maybe 10 years ago. People wanted to be a champion for housing discrimination. Is it going to be the DOJ? Is it going to be BOLI? Well, it's BOLI, so let's do it. Let's inform the landlords what their responsibilities are, inform the tenants what their rights are, and give people a pathway to make sure that they are having their rights enforced.
And do you think that is and I'm just following up a little bit, do you think that is an area though that would be better served elsewhere? I mean, you talked about the fact that people, your assumption is that people don't necessarily know it's there, just kind of based on the low percentage of complaints. does it make sense for it to be somewhere where it might have more visibility as well as additional staff?
I don't think there's anywhere else for it to go. I think it makes sense just because it is in ORS 659A. I mean, it is part of the rights that are guaranteed by that statutory framework, and I think it makes a lot of sense for us. There are some kind of synergies and understanding that framework and then applying it to just another place. What I would love us to do, though, is actually be able to deliver on that. So as far as what the agency does right now, that I think honestly, in a perfect world, we would be doing we'd be doing that more and making it more efficient for both employers and workers.
Okay, thank you. Cheri, same question for you. Are there aspects of BOLI's work that you think should be housed elsewhere? And if you are able to specifically address the housing discrimination aspect, just whether that should remain with BOLI.
So Sunday was the 54th year anniversary of the Fair Housing Act. So this is a very timely question. I think that housing is probably the #1 issue that is affecting Oregon's workforce at the moment. And so I think it's very important that this office continues to address this, but not only continues to address it, but actually the commissioner takes a position of championing workforce housing. I worked in the legislature on Senate or House Bill 2001 and supported that to pass for middle housing opportunities. What we're seeing is that our workforce is increasingly experiencing homelessness, which is really, really difficult to watch. I was part of our Bend Heroes Foundation brought to me when I was in the legislature a concept of building a veterans village to help our homeless veterans. And as a community, we all worked together and built 15 tiny cabins and a large triple wide that had wraparound services. And inside of this veterans village, we had great community support. Everybody showed up and helped side and work together. We had students and business owners and workforce show up and do this together. And when we finally were able to house our veterans, the first 5, we did it in 3 groups of 5. The first 5, 2 of those 5 already had jobs. And that was really surprising to me to see the high percentage of people that were coming in to live in a shelter situation that had jobs. I really thought, honestly, that I would be helping, that part of the role of the village would be to help them find jobs, not just give them a safe place to sleep before they went to their jobs. And so I think that this is really a crisis situation in Oregon, and it really needs a champion. And so even above and beyond fair housing, I think we need workforce housing, and we really need to be advocating for that. Fair housing, of course, is without a doubt important to enforce, and the department should do so to its fidelity. And I want to again audit that and make sure what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong, and how do we champion more of the things that we're doing right around that. But I want to go to the legislature and also talk to them about workforce housing and how important it is to make sure that our workforce has stable housing that they can afford. In Bend right now, our median housing price is between $740 and $780, depending on which projection you look at. And that is not a price that most people can afford that are working families. I don't know any working families that can. And so without adequate housing supply, we are failing our workforce as a whole. And we need to make sure that we have a voice to champion this from. And I would really like to be that voice and have BOLI be doing the advocacy to work with the legislature to try and come up with programs to help out our workforce and make sure we don't have workforce in Oregon that's homeless.
And so is your idea that it would be that BOLI's role would be purely as advocacy about identifying the need for it, or do you see BOLI taking an additional role in helping create or foster workforce housing?
So I think that would be the commissioner, using the commissioner position to be able to champion that, and testify and do some work groups and have that, BOLI commissioner position be utilized in that way to be able to, attend work groups, hold work groups, to bring stakeholders together, bring forward the workforce groups, the unions, the businesses. And, as I'm on the chamber board, and yesterday our biggest conversation was about workforce housing and how we're going to get more housing for our workforce, because we just don't have enough staff, and we don't have enough staff because there's not enough houses for people to access that are in the right price range. And so continuing those types of conversations and really elevating them to a level of a higher level with the legislature, the governor, and really using that commissioner role to make sure that we are addressing this and not letting anyone turn their head. It's not just fair housing, it's also access to housing in totality. And so, but that doesn't diminish the fair housing piece. We do need to address that and the claims that are there and make sure that those are done to fidelity and that they're very transparent and open process.
Okay, great, thank you. Casey.
Can I make just a totally a dad joke? And I learned from the Willamette Week endorsement interviews that I'm not supposed to make jokes, but I'm going to make one that I think that Cheri is saying that she needs to have a BOLI pulpit. Right? Thank you.
Thank you.
We won't talk at all about smoking a bowl together, because apparently that was the takeaway from Willamette Week. I'm sorry, Helen, you were asking something.
No, that's fine. And I appreciate that, actually, because as I was telling Cheri before you guys got on, this is our last endorsement interview of the May cycle. So we're definitely in that mode to appreciate that. So basically, I was wondering if there are aspects of BOLI's work that you think would be better placed in a different agency, or if you would look to trim the workload, the complaint load, the backlog by looking strategically at other agencies or departments to take on some of this.
Yeah, I've had the benefit of listening to both of my worthy colleagues here, but I did want to note, first of all, that though I have disagreements with both the character and the experience of Commissioner Hoyle, this is an area where she has pulled in and she has brought in the housing and urban development component. So now the state BOLI can do both state and federal housing investigations, and that's a great thing. But at the moment, I want to tell you that there's also there are people who are emailing me and calling me asking, I can't get any help there for my housing complaint. And that's the thing that's been most disturbing to me, is learning that there's just not enough time. Pulling back though, I just want to note, Helen, that I think it's really important before we go considering passing off work or taking on new work to really deal in an urgent manner with the caseload, the backlog that we do have. And one of the things that I have found most challenging in my work as a county commissioner is when I send somebody to a state agency and they don't get any resolution. That's this like terrible thing. And Christina, obviously you have the same experience, but as a lawyer, you can push. And what I have are the tools of the political process, right? What I will say is that in conversations with agency heads in other agencies that work with BOLI, that have a nexus, because BOLI does the retaliation investigations, is that right now, whistleblowers, so people who have made a complaint and then had retaliation against them, are very fearful. And so the connection and the coordination with other state agencies really needs to be strengthened. And what that probably is going to look like is having them through DOJ do the investigation and then bring it to us for the final steps. And I don't want to do that, but it's a way to clear that backlog, especially retaliation complaints, which are honestly, I see it and I hear it. It's one of the most serious, because if we can't have people stepping up and saying something is wrong, and then it's agencies and the state and workplaces are going to get worse and worse, and more dangerous and less fair for everybody involved. So that's the one area where I see that we really can do some urgent backlog removal and also strengthen those relationships.
Okay, thank you.
And that's groups like OSHA, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, you got it.
Thank you. Cheri, if you can go first on this question. Tell me about your approach to education versus enforcement, what that looks like in terms of bully responding to wage and hour violations, for instance. Like, do you have a philosophy about when each comes into play?
Yeah, living through the pandemic as a business owner, the rules were changing, weekly. We were having to have different exits. We were open, we were closed, we were, 25% open, we were 50% open. Tables had to be separated. Tables didn't have to be separated. Staff had to be separated. At one point, we put down tape on the floor in our kitchen to make sure that everybody had a 6-foot square box that was cooking while we were doing to-go food. So I think that, businesses try their very best to follow the rules that they know and understand. And so in education is a huge piece. I do think that when you talk about streamlining things, I think there's an opportunity to streamline how we educate our businesses, and using technology as our tool to be able to deliver a lot of these information and giving more updates, because there are a lot of rules that will be coming out that will be new. This education piece over this term that's coming up will be very important. We will be doing Paid Family Leave Act. And when you talk about working with other agencies, it's going to be very important to work with the employment department on how Paid Family Leave Act is rolled out. Because I think that there are two things. We need to make sure that employees have access to it and that employers understand it and roll it out in a way that works on a payroll side for all of our businesses and our employees. And so that there aren't a lot of big cracks in the middle to have employees get stuck in. And so I think that it's really, really important that we have a lot of education, more so than even normal. There's also ag overtime rules that are coming out, and they are extremely confusing, even to me, with all of these tax credits that are available for the businesses to be able to pay the overtime for the employees over the next 5 years. And so there is going to be a tremendous amount of education that I believe is going to have to be done as we put in these new rules. And then, of course, there's rules that are being phased out from the pandemic, and those should also be educated on that they're not there as well. And so there is a huge opportunity, I believe, in education for our businesses so that they can follow the rules. And then when people are not following the rules, the first tactic, I think, is mediation, to be able to make sure that the issue is solved to both parties' ability to come together and make sure that the employees' needs are met. And then thirdly there would be fines and fees that would be used to work to punish habitual offenders.
Great, thank you. I think I was trying to go in alphabetical order, so I think Casey, you're next.
I think I was too, but I couldn't really remember. So, okay, well, thank you. All right, I'm gonna make one more pot joke and then we'll get out of the way, or one more reference to cannabis. And that is that as I was one of the original licensees through the OLCC in 2016 under the state legal system for cannabis. And one of the things that I saw in that role was that antagonism and a sense of adversarialness is a really good way to strengthen divisions rather than building trust. And for us as the regulated and the regulator, it took time and it took conflict, unfortunately, to get to a place where the regulators trusted the regulated and realized that they both had a similar mission, which was safe and legal cannabis. On the flip side, as a county commissioner who makes a lot of land use decisions, I also interact with a lot of agencies that their funding is dependent upon the polluters, as it were. And, you know, to call out then, of course, DEQ, but we have a lot of state agencies that their funding source is directly related to the businesses that they regulate. BOLI is unique in that role, and then only a tiny bit of funding comes through things like these the applications, right? So for things like prevailing wage rates. And so I do think that BOLI has a really unique role in having really, we're not regulating businesses, we're telling them their responsibilities and then holding them accountable for the treatment of their workers or the treatment of the, downy woodpecker, the treatment of people who come to their businesses. My work as a county commissioner was really around, and when I came into the role, I was determined that people knew what their county commissioner did and who they were. And what that meant was a ton of communication with the public, because I realized that if we made a decision and nobody knew about it, one, they would get mad if they didn't know about it and they didn't like it. And it also built distrust. It built that chasm between the person who is up on the dais and the regular person out there in the community. And I will say, shameless plug for our local newspaper. They're really good at informing the public, but as you know, local newspapers have a very limited circulation these days. So for me, I come at it from a lot of different experiences, and I see BOLI as having this really unique role of responsibility and enforcement, and it's really around communication. So if businesses don't know what they need to do, they're not going to know how to follow the law. And it's super simple and straightforward, but it has a lot of experience behind it. And thank you.
Great, thank you. And Christina, same question for you. Can you tell us a little bit about your philosophy regarding education versus enforcement?
Yeah, my philosophy is that we have less complaints if we empower our businesses by making it as simple and accessible as possible. So, you know, I remember when I started my business, you know, the Secretary of State sends you this like 167-page PDF and your eyes glaze over. The only thing they say about BOLI is, hey, go get your workplace posters there. And that's just a huge miss, because look, employers can call BOLI and ask for specific advice about their situation. I mean, honestly, this is a great deal. You know, you're paying lawyers hundreds of dollars an hour for the same advice, right? So this is a huge service that we have. And we also, you know, from my vantage point, right, I know where the weak spots are. I know that, you know, we've got employers with 6 or more employees who they are subject to, for example, disability laws. It's a complicated area of the law. And it's not a surprise that these folks got to comply with it, but we don't make it easy. So when I say make it easy, I mean, literally have a form. Okay, you've got an employee that's got a disability. Here's the form you can use, and have some repose. Like, okay, we use this form to do the interactive process, which is a legally required thing in Oregon and at the federal level. But so to get only the medical information that you need without running afoul of medical privacy laws, and know that, okay, I've given the employee this form. I know I've engaged in the interactive process. I'm not going to get in trouble under this law. I mean, really simple. And the way I think about this really practically as a business owner. I go onto this website and I say, look at this entire universe of laws that I have to comply with. I don't even know where to start, right? So can't we just say, okay, you are a business owner, you got 7 employees, you're in this industry, it's public, private. This is the universe. This is what applies to you. You don't even have to know anything else right now. This is all you need to know. Just make it easy so that by the time that we're at enforcement, we know that the folks that we're dealing with are the ones who are just truly like this is part of their business model is wage theft. They don't care about the law. That's where we're focusing our enforcement resources on, are the folks that are intentionally violating the law and saying, I'm going to misclassify workers because I don't want to pay payroll taxes like the rest of these folks.
Great, thank you.
So I was going to ask, oh, go ahead, Casey.
No, I was just thinking, I really appreciated what both Cheri and Christina said. And I was thinking a lot of the work that I end up doing of tracking down solutions has been for folks in the LGBTQIA community who don't feel like they have places to go. And that's when I think one of the, we were all talking about communication to different kinds of businesses. And that's one that really feels like it needs to be communicated to people because there's all of these different places that people go. And apologies, Lauren.
That's okay. I think the first question is to you, actually, Casey. Am I right, Helen? Do I have the order correct? So I was curious, do you see a role for BOLI in addressing sexual harassment issues at the Oregon legislature, especially considering the recent lawsuit filed by the former legislative equity officer? That's a mouthful.
Great. So if we do the Wayback Machine back in time, you all know, like how far should I go back? But I do know that, former Commissioner Avakian on his second to last day in office dropped a report and a complaint that was filed on behalf of several individuals. And from that, Commissioner Hoyle then was the one to sign off on the settlement agreement, and that formed the Legislative Equity Office. As far as I can tell from the conversations I've had, and I alluded to this in my opening statement, that settlement is at risk of breach right now because there's all this outsourcing that goes on to private attorneys. And I will say that whenever a state agency or an organization within the state uses private attorneys, no offense, Christina, I get nervous because we really need to have DOJ involved, and we need a process by which things can be public, right? The public needs to know what's happening, especially with important investigations of sexual harassment at the state capitol. So reopening that and doing a relook at the settlement is a priority to me. And I hope I answer your question, Laura.
Yeah, I'm just curious what you would see as a concrete action BOLI would have. Obviously, at one point with some of these cases, there is a level of confidentiality. I think that's a great. But in terms of how would you initiate as a BOLI commissioner a relook at this process that the legislature's adopted that's now been in place, but it may be at risk of falling apart? Yeah,
for sure. So, I mean, the mechanics of that is to inform the folks who are listed on that or their proxies, right? Because Speaker Kotek is no longer Speaker Kotek, as both the BOLI commissioner and with staff, and lay out, here are the pieces of evidence that we have that this settlement may be in breach. And some of those are not having a legislative equity officer and going through multiple and having a lawsuit pending. So reopening that is the first step in the process. But as you know, there was the risk and the threat of fines and penalties, for example. But we have a lot of tools, but the first step is to assume that we can, assume good faith, but also remind the legislature that the Bureau of Labor and Industries is here to hold people accountable for sexual harassment, and that we will continue to do that.
Okay, great, thank you. Christine, to you. What role you see BOLI playing in the issues as addressing sexual harassment that we've seen in the Oregon legislature, especially in light of this recent lawsuit?
Yeah, I mean, of course, BOLI has a role in addressing sexual harassment, no matter where it is, right, including the legislature. And I think it's important for BOLI to maintain that level of independence, that they feel comfortable enough, to do that. I think, reflecting on my own career, I've gone up against, unfortunately, no one's above the law, right? Even people that I've been aligned with in terms of their organizational goals, those people also have to be held accountable. And I have no problem doing that in terms of, one of the great things I think about about the tool of BOLI that is different than the civil justice system is that you have the ability to have conciliation agreements that incorporate more than just money, right? They incorporate training, they incorporate things like the Legislative Equity Office. And if we're going to do that and use that really important tool, we have to follow it all the way to wherever it leads. And if these things are not being, if there's not fidelity to the terms of the agreement, we obviously have to make sure that the terms of the agreements are enforced.
And I guess, you got at that answer a little bit, but I recognize it is tricky. I mean, you do both have people within similar political parties, but you also have people, you might hear from the speaker, whoever the new speaker is, about the concern for confidentiality of employees. So how do you push back on that if there are concerns that something is politically motivated versus what's the best process in place for dealing with these complaints?
Can you say more about the confidentiality?
Well, obviously, we heard a lot during the evolution of these cases that led to the report that people didn't want to come forward. And so there is part of the process in place that allows people to not be named. That led to some issues with this process. So how do you push people either who are in other elected offices or even in your own political party to go farther to make sure that there is an outcome that is fair and a process that is fair?
I mean, really, I see the role of the commissioner as being quite independent from that. It has nothing to do with someone who's in my political party or someone who I'm friends with or worked with, even passed the Workplace Fairness Act with, which was aimed at rooting out discrimination, was a direct, response to some of what was going on in the Capitol. So I do think that there is, of course, a role for protecting the confidentiality of survivors, and that is why it's appropriate for a commissioner's complaint, to give that kind of level of confidentiality. And I don't see that. I would say that's what I think.
And Christina, or maybe Laura, I just realized that from what I hear, because I hear from a lot of people, the process and the challenge in the equity office right now is that there's confidentiality on one hand, and then timeline of investigations. And the confidentiality is very important, but the timeline also has to be dramatically shortened to make sure that somebody who's had a complaint against them has it either cleared or substantiated, and that the survivor is cleared or substantiated, right? The timeline is the flip side of confidentiality.
Thank you. And Cheri, to you.
Thank you, Laura. Did I hear someone else talking? Am I okay to go? Okay, sorry. So having served in the legislature, this was a shocking experience for me as a business owner for 18 years to see what actually happens in the Capitol and how tolerated this awful sexual harassment behavior has been, how the agreement with BOLI has been broken and not upheld to its integrity. And it has to be a zero tolerance policy. From the commissioner's perspective, there can be no tolerance for sexual harassment in any workplace of any kind. And you go in and you hold everybody accountable. The first week that I'm in office, I would meet with the Speaker of the House. I would meet with the new Senate president. I'm not sure who that will be, and the new governor, and instruct them that I will be holding them accountable to uphold the agreement that was put into place, and that the office has to be functional, that the cases have to be held with integrity, and that confidentiality does not have to mean that these cases cannot be held with integrity. And so I think that it is just having a very strong voice and really bringing people together and saying, I'm sorry that you think you're above this, but you are absolutely not. And, you need to make sure that your house is in order and that the Capitol is functioning in a way that everybody is safe to work in it. And And that is without a doubt the leadership that I would want to bring to this office.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Let's see, I lost track on, I think, is it Christina goes first on this one? Okay, thank you. Tell us a little bit about your views on apprenticeship programs that BOLI oversees and whether you'd seek to expand them to other industries.
Yeah, I mean, the apprenticeship piece is one of the most exciting pieces of the work that BOLI does. I mean, we've got our small businesses and working families that are struggling with rising costs right now. And, you know, we've got workforce shortage issues in a number of industries, and this is exactly where we can meet those needs. So this tried and true model of earn as you learn, it's such a sustainable model that helps us, you know, diversify our workforce. And we have our great, you know, kind of building trades apprenticeships that are our standard apprenticeships. But with the Future Ready Oregon, you know, $20 million, we're going to be able to expand those apprenticeships into areas like nursing, manufacturing. Also, there's money for pre-apprenticeship programs as well in construction, nursing, and manufacturing. So I think it'll be important to have folks that are at the helm that are willing to dig into the administrative rules, because our administrative rules, I mean, they were written for, you know, thinking about apprenticeships in a certain way. So we're going to have to make sure that they're flexible enough to meet the needs of our industries. And I will work to be expanding them. And look, it's not a surprise, right, that we're going to need healthcare workers. It's not a surprise we're going to need long-term care workers. You know, we have the first CNA program, apprenticeship program that's been approved by BOLI, a surgical tech program approved by BOLI. I mean, this is starting to show that we can expand the reach. I mean, I'd love to see us doing it with childcare workers, education workers, special education instructors, wherever there is a place in our industries where it's not a surprise you need people that are skilled in very particular ways. You know, computer programming, this is a perfect model for us at BOLI. And then, you know, this is another place where we need to be more accessible and adaptable, right? I mean, you go online and you say, I want to do an apprenticeship. Again, you're getting a, you know, 200-page PDF, and that's not accessible. So making sure that we're, you know, working with our K-12 partners and making there be a streamlined, you know, get our kids into the career technical education programs in their high schools. Then you've got your pre-apprenticeship program, 16, 17-year-olds, and then it's a seamless pathway into the apprenticeship models. And, you know, even if the kids don't end up going into the apprenticeship models, which are fantastic, I mean, they have better outcomes in school just by being involved in CTE. So that's a huge place where I'm going to be really, really focused.
Great, thank you. And Cheri, can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on apprenticeships? I don't know why I'm having so much trouble. And you know, if there are areas in which you would try to expand it.
So this is, I'm going to be a little nerdy, but this is what really gets me super excited about this position is the career and technical education piece was a really big part of my school board experience of expanding out career and technical education programs. We had 12 programs when I left the Bend Lapine School Board that we had for kids for different opportunities and different career and technical education classes. And while I was on the school board, I worked with everyone across the state to go to editorial boards and support Measure 98 and get Measure 98 passed. So we have secured funding for our career and technical education programs, and that's helped raise our graduation rates. But when our kids go to the career centers and their future centers at their high schools, if they go there, they're instructed and they say they want to go to college, there is an application, there's a counselor that you know, a person that you get forwarded to, and there's applications for financial aid. So there's a very constructed path to get to college. 40% of our students go on to college. So that means we're leaving 60% of our students without a path that is really laid out for them. And what I really want to do is take that career and technical education money that we put in Measure 98 and complete the path all the way to skilled, high-waged paying jobs. And so I think it's very important that we take the mystery out of what it means to get to an apprenticeship and on-the-job training and expand that out so that our students can go to their career and future centers and say, hey, I want to work with my hands. What are my options? I want to be an electrician. I want to work in healthcare. And we can give them the opportunities, and we can say, and I think we do this with technology by making sure there's an updated list of all the people that are providing these services in our state, and find out where the funding is for it, how much it costs, what's the time frame, who do you call, where do you contact, where's the application, and have all this together in a space where it is not a mystery anymore, where we actually literally construct the bridge from high school into a career that is high waged and good paying job, right? That has skills. And so it was one of the biggest disappointments for me in the pandemic that we didn't open up an apprenticeship for healthcare workers to, like they had done in the past in World War II, where you do triage nursing and you do an apprenticeship program where you can bring people in to help support the workforce, because we all know how short we are in our hospitals and staffing. My hospital right now has 800 people that they're short. And so we need to make sure that we can fill these positions. We need to take the workforce that we need, and we need to be able to have the apprenticeship programs to get kids from high school and utilize those skills that they're learning in their career and technical education programs and match them with these high-waged skilled jobs. And so I think that it is the biggest opportunity that we could have in our state. And we have $200 million that was just passed into this area. So I don't believe that there's needs for money. I think there's needs to make the connections and the successes for our students. And I believe that we can do this in a really wonderful way to create these opportunities. You see it with Intel. Intel has 10,000 jobs that are going to be $135,000 a year making chips. They are expanding out a program right now with Hillsborough High School. It's a 2-week program to see if kids are interested in this for a job. And I would like to take that statewide.
Great.
There's no reason that we couldn't.
Great, thank you very much. And Casey, what about you? What are your thoughts on apprenticeships?
Yes, there's, as you've heard from Christina and Cheri, there's a lot to the apprenticeships. Obviously, there's a lot of money coming from it. I've thought a lot about this because I'm on the executive committee of the Wilmette Workforce Partnership, so one of the workforce boards. And one of the things that that keeps coming back to me, and maybe it's because I work with Commissioner Craig Pope. So if you know who he is, then it's time for you to smile a little bit. He's always asking, but how are we holding ourselves accountable for this? And so we see a lot of money getting spent. We spend a lot of money as the workforce partnership spent ostensibly to help people, and yet, as Cheri talked about, most kids have no idea where to go for help, and it's very expensive to get somebody through the training program. Uh-oh, I'm getting signed out, sorry. Hopefully I don't get cut off. It's time for my son's D&D.
Okay.
So if I disappear, apologies. But so what I've started to think about is not how do we absolutely as a state need to be successful with this $200 million of workforce training money. But one of the ways that I feel like we will be successful is if we go to trainees, if we go to the people that we're going to help and pay for their training, and we ask them, what do you want? What do you value, and how do you measure success, rather than it being purely an exercise that of accountability that we have in the state statute? Because right now there's measures of accountability, but they're not necessarily measures by which we can say, I am better for it, or my community is better for it. So the last component of it is that apprenticeships and the apprenticeship model, there's a lot of nuance in there. One thing that I do here is that because we're in the unique relationship of registering and overseeing apprenticeships, is that some of them actually don't graduate people. And whether it's because they don't build up enough hours over a time, or because the program itself doesn't get people to the point of getting their license in whatever field they're seeking, this is an area where the BOLI commissioner needs to hold apprenticeship pathways accountable, and that's both industry and trade. So my the things that I do best at the county and that I do with the workforce partnership is making sure that people know about our services and making sure that their experience is heard when we're doing the training and when we're following up to hold ourselves accountable. And I will leave it at that because we've talked a long time.
Great. Thank
and
you
sorry,
so
our kids, you get to watch my kids playing.
Well, great. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. This was a really good conversation. We appreciate it. If we have any follow-ups, we will contact you individually. But our plan, our hope is that we'll be releasing our endorsement on Sunday. But again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you to all of
Thank
you,
you.
and to
Thank
you
you.
too, Cheri.